What up, guys? We're at Sin City Iron with Stan the Rhino Efforting, world's strongest bodybuilder again. And today, I want to talk to you about what's on your shirt, the vertical diet. How did you come up with it, and how would you explain it to a person that's just on the street that doesn't know much about fitness?
Yeah, well, vertical diet is something I've been using with my clients for over 10 years. It's kind of the culmination of everything I've learned from 30 years of competing, both in bodybuilding and powerlifting and college and coaching and being coached and collaborating with other great athletes. And, it's really comprehensive. It's not just diet. It's sleep and hydration and nutrition. It's training. It's blood testing. It's a whole host of things that I want all of my clients to do.
It's more of a lifestyle, actually.
It really is, and it's intended also to be what we call simple, sensible, and sustainable. The diet portion in particular is about building a foundation. I always say that how tall a pyramid is depends on the size of its base. And so I try and build a foundation that's highly bioavailable, micronutrient dense, easy to digest foods, that has a kind of a macro content that lends itself well to performance. And so obviously calories are king, and we got to set those for the individual's needs, whether it's to lose weight, to be in a deficit, or gain weight, to be in a surplus. And then after that, getting sufficient protein. Then beyond that, I'm kind of focused on micronutrients, because where you put fats and carbs is really not all that important in terms of weight loss. Mostly it's personal preference. But for performance, I do like to see people get sufficient amount of carbs to fuel, particularly with athletes and with people doing weight training, to fuel those workouts. And I like for that foundation to be high in micronutrients. I like to make sure we've got plenty of calcium in the diet and potassium in the diet, iron, B12, zinc, choline. And so I try and select the foods first that'll lend themselves well for that.
So what foods contain those?
Well, for the protein, I like to use a variety of proteins. I'm a big fan of red meat just because it's 3 times higher in iron, 6 times higher in zinc, and 9 times higher in B12 than chicken. And that's not to say you can't use chicken in the diet, just don't exclude it. I like to use eggs, and particularly the egg yolk, at least 1 or 2 or 3, depending on the size of the individual, because of its choline and biotin content. Dairy for its calcium. It's very helpful in calcium.
Can you explain this? When I eat chicken breast straight for a whole week, I feel like a pussy. What does that have to do with the red meat?
I'm afraid the academics would kill me, but as somebody who's experienced the same thing and worked with hundreds and hundreds of clients over the years in a performance setting, I feel the same way. When I eat white fish and chicken, I just don't feel as, maybe it's because the calorie content is less, there's a little more fat generally in the meat selections, even though we use pretty lean meats even for competitive bikini and figure girls. It just kind of depends on the total calorie count for that. But again, higher in iron, higher in B12, higher in zinc, creatine, carnitine. I mean, there's a whole host of things that red meat offers in a performance setting that I think are valuable. And since you asked, particularly for women and particularly for young athletic women, because they tend to suffer more from the female triad, which is chronic calorie restriction, amenorrhea, which is a cessation of the menstrual period, and osteopenia. And they generally will suffer from low iron. Because of the women's menstrual period, they tend to struggle with maintaining enough iron, specifically when they're active. And that's kind of one of the big things with red meat. And I see that a lot with, I do a lot of blood testing with my athletes, and I see low iron in a lot of women, in particular active runners and those kinds of things. And so I throw the red meat in there. And I know that conjures up a whole lot of industry myths and what have you about red meat. But nonetheless, it's part of a complete diet that includes a broad micronutrient base. I mentioned calcium and dairy, yogurt if you can't tolerate
like Greek yogurt
from milk. Yeah, a good fat-free Greek yogurt is much easier to digest, lower in lactose.
What about for the carbs part? Are there like specific carbs that you prefer?
That's where I head next. Now I'm getting carbs, and most of my carbs are high potassium based. So I'll start with, say, a potato, twice as much potassium as a banana.
Twice as a banana?
Twice as much as a banana.
They've been trying to sell us bananas this whole time.
I know, but between the potato, daily potato, and fruit, which often gets demonized in these guru nutrition diets, they kind of avoid red meat, avoid fruit, avoid dairy, avoid salt. avoid egg yolks. I put all those things in my diets, particularly for performance athletes, particularly for women, because they perform better. They just have more energy. They can train harder.
What about guys with periods? What do you tell them to eat?
Yeah, that's a whole new thing that I'm not familiar with. Guys that have babies and that kind of thing. I'm not that advanced yet in my nutrition.
You gotta let the
teachings.
research catch up. I
Look,
think.
we didn't have the internet in the 80s when I was in college, and so I'm just not up to speed on that. But for now, I build that foundation focusing on potassium first, the carbohydrates in particular. And generally my dieters, they probably don't get past the potato and the fruit and vegetables. You know, spinach is high in potassium as well, because that generally gives them sufficient calories for their diet. They've gotten a gram of protein per pound of body weight, generally half that in fat, 0.5 grams of fat per pound of body weight. The rest is carbs, and that's highly variable depending on the size of the individual and their workload, but that's how I calculate it mathematically, backing into the equation from the total calories that they need. And then those larger athletes, or people with more mass or a higher workload, now I'm looking at more carbs, and they could throw some oatmeal in there if they desire. Generally, they have a hard time digesting massive amounts of grains in oatmeal, and so I'm pushing towards white rice in order to meet those 4,000+ calorie diets. And I've often said the difference between a 3,000 and a 4,000 calorie diet is really 3 cups of rice. That's what it comes down to.
I see.
And I try and design all of this to be simple, sensible, and sustainable. You've always heard me say that compliance is the science, and that being able to actually implement and adhere to this diet is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And so I've got to be understanding of an individual's personal preferences and the types of foods they like to eat, when they like to eat, and then design the diet to accommodate them. And another thing is just in terms of convenience. If you're unable to prepare the meals and have them available for you when you need to eat them, then that's hard too. So we talk a lot about meal prepping, of course, which is the #1 way to comply with a diet. It's very common in with bodybuilding, figure physique, and bikinis. They're always carrying around their Tupperwares and their six-pack bag or what have you. And you know, everybody's heard me say I love the thermos because I can put a hot meal in there, and then 4, 6, 8 hours later it's still hot. I don't have to search around for a microwave. And that's how I travel, and that's how even when I'm home, working from home, and I've got the kids, I'll make breakfast and I'll put a couple of meals into a couple of thermoses and just set them there on the counter. And now, no matter what happens, if I got to go pick the kids up from school and I got to take them to a sporting event or
Got to eat
something,
in the car or something, you can still eat
yeah,
it.
I'm not stopping at Carl's Jr. I can eat what I like to eat when I like to eat it, and it's the macro and counts that I want with the calories that I need, and it's super, super convenient.
I noticed in your book, you talked about how like you don't really prescribe like broccoli, like you like prefer spinach. Is there a reason for like a certain set of vegetables or something else?
You know, I do have a section there where I talk about people who have digestive distress, IBS in particular, where they get a lot of gas and bloating.
I think Gio has that. She farts all the time.
Well, yeah, she's not here to defend herself, and I'm not privy to any of that. So, but when I'm training, I came up in the industry training a lot of bodybuilders and powerlifters and athletes. Bodybuilders, particularly women, physique, figure, bikini now, the guru diets tended to be protein powder, egg whites, white fish, and tons and tons and tons of broccoli to satiate you. That's what the intent of it was.
Because of the fiber.
Because of the fiber. And what we found was that a lot of them would end up with severe bloating. And whether or not they were susceptible to IBS, it's just too much at once. And so you got to be cautious with the dose. If you do suffer from IBS, then the most effective diet intervention is the low FODMAP diet. Many people have heard me talk about fermentable oligodimonosaccharides and polyols. And it's specific for those with IBS. And it's the kinds of foods that tend to cause more gas in the large intestine. And so there's a list, and you could just Google a list of low FODMAP foods that shows you the foods that you might be easier to digest and harder to digest if you suffer from that condition. Now, it's individualistic. Not everybody has that problem. It's dose dependent. How much of those foods you eat can influence your reaction. How the foods are prepared matters. Whether or not you cook the broccoli so that it's soft, as opposed to eating raw broccoli.
Yeah.
And then it's cumulative in nature. Things like sugar alcohols are on there, and you might be able to handle a little bit, but as you eat more and more of those things, you have kind of a spillover effect. There's a limit to the amount, and everybody has different limits. And things like sugar alcohols on that list can cause diarrhea and digestive distress. So I do talk specifically about low FODMAP foods, and I referenced broccoli as one of those foods that may cause gas and bloating for particular individuals eating massive quantities. And there's other ways to satiate yourself using lower FODMAP foods if you're in, you know, like a diet and you want to be full, but not necessarily be painfully bloated.
So what are some, I guess, common causes of failure that you've seen if people try to stick to either a diet or even the vertical diet? Like, what are some pitfalls that people could watch out for?
I think most of the time diets fail because people get hungry or they get tired. And that often happens if they don't get enough whole foods that are satiating.
Yeah.
Maybe enough protein, which tends to be satiating, enough fiber, enough high satiety foods. I mentioned boiled potatoes and oranges are highest on the satiety index, where they measure how long people feel satiated for after they consume those foods. Another thing is too large of a calorie deficit, or too large of a departure from what is their lifestyle. Some people might believe that they have to skip breakfast in order to lose weight, the whole intermittent fasting thing. It's no better than any other diet. It may work for some people because it creates a calorie deficit by eliminating a meal, but not everybody enjoys that, and so it might not be sustainable. Same thing would be true of, say, the keto diet. Again, no evidence that it's any better than any other diet, but by eliminating an entire food group, you may create a calorie deficit which can help you lose weight. And if it helps satiate you, and that's individualistic as well, some people respond well to it, some people don't. So it's a matter of personal preference, and I don't like to pigeonhole somebody into a particular diet plan, including the vertical diet. I have clients that are paleo, clients that are intermittent fast, clients that keto, clients that are vegans. I have a chapter in the book on vegan and vegetarian, all the way up to and including competitive athletes. But each of those different diets has to take into account how the individual responds in selecting the path that feels the least restrictive for them. And when we can try and curb some of that hunger, there will be some hunger in any calorie deficit. The idea is to make it manageable. And by utilizing all the methods that we just said, the higher protein, higher fiber, more consistent meal timing so that your body kind of gets used to a schedule, high satiety foods, a smaller deficit, a little more patience. And on the other side of that, not overtraining. We see a compensation effect when people run out and start, you know, if historically that hasn't been their habit, try and run 5 miles a day to lose weight, which often happens. People go out and they start pounding the pavement.
Especially the first week.
The first week often happens.
Yeah.
And then they end up with a lot of DOMs. They go into the gym and try and crush themselves on a workout. You got to go 0 to 1, 1 to 2. You can't go 0 to 100. And everybody wants to come out of the gate, I'm going to lose 30 pounds in 30 days. And then they experience all of these problems that I just mentioned. Extreme hunger, a lot of soreness, fatigue. And the compensation effect is such that when you go in and crush yourself in a workout, you end up sitting more and eating more. You get hungry and tired. And so it's kind of a right pocket, left pocket deal. So I'm cautious when I prescribe exercise programs that it's something that is slightly more than you did before, but not so much that it's going to cause all the compensation effects, and that it's something that you can comply with. I rarely prescribe someone going to the gym and doing a 40-minute treadmill if it's not something they enjoy. I say the best exercise is the one you'll do. There's too many barriers to entry. You got to get in the car, you got to drive to the gym, you got to do your 40 minutes of cardio, and that kind of thing for a busy professional or a parent whose schedule is often fluctuates is the least likely to be complied with long term. That's why I like the 10-minute walks, because they're so easy. It's a habit that you can attach to an existing behavior, eating.
Yeah.
When you eat, take a 10 or 15
Right
minute
after.
walk. And we do that consistently.
Is that part of the vertical lifestyle too?
It is.
Like the walking?
It is. And again, I'm glad you said that, the lifestyle. It's not just a diet.
Yeah.
It should include some exercise. It should include optimizing your sleep. It should include some resistance training, because you want to maintain your lean mass throughout this weight loss phase.
Yeah.
So really important that I create a training program that they can comply with. If they don't like lifting weights, I got to try and find something to provide load to the muscles such that they don't lose muscle tissue.
You have all those door stops over there.
Those are perfect.
Yeah.
And it's anything they enjoy. Some people, they come into the gym and their trainer starts having them do battle ropes and burpees. That's not enjoyable. You know, if they can make them sweat and breathe hard, they think they're doing something. They feel like, oh, I'm burning calories. Whereas in fact, the majority of weight loss occurs from the calorie deficit from diet. Focus your effort in the kitchen. And then that non-exercise activity, just staying more active throughout the day. The 10-minute walks are part of accumulating steps, but just try and get a step count that exceeds where you were previously, and maybe gradually work up to where you're getting 8,000 plus steps, maybe 10,000 steps a day. And as you diet, make sure you maintain that step count, because your body will start compensating with reduced output, reduced energy expenditure by reducing your steps and by wanting you to sit more. And you'll blink slower and you'll fidget less. I mean, all of these things are compensatory mechanisms that your body will employ to defend itself from the weight loss. And so you got to try and find a way to be aware of those things and then kind of combat them long term, in addition to the hunger, the decrease in energy expenditure from movement. And so I find I want to get them into the gym, and I want to work them around the room and find exercises that they enjoy. Because it doesn't matter, they're all just tools to stimulate the muscle so that it doesn't go away whenever you're dieting. And we can use, and it doesn't have to be extraordinarily fatiguing. You can get a high stimulus with a low fatigue. We talked about that on our gym tour, and we talked about why I use box squats and why I use more concentric good mornings as opposed to trying to do the negative portion. Because the soreness isn't the primary driver of lean mass retention. Mechanical tension, just lifting to within a couple reps of failure, and volume are the two primary drivers of maintaining lean body mass. And probably only twice a week. You could do a full body workout twice a week. Maybe supersetting a chest and a back exercise, and then a quad exercise and a hamstring exercise. You'd be in and out of the gym in less than 30 minutes with sufficient volume to maintain lean mass, or maybe even grow if you were an untrained individual, with just 1 hour a week of weight training. And the rest of it could be walking, and hopefully it would work up to a brisk walk, so you would actually get some sort of cardiovascular benefit from it. They generally, the walks start slow and they get faster over time as you start to get more and more comfortable with them. And I'll go out some mornings and I'll be so beat up from maybe overtraining recently because of the strength training I've been doing that my walks are pretty pathetic, they're pretty slow. But by the end of the 10 minutes or 15 minutes, I'll walk longer and faster, just having gotten out there. So just showing up becomes the most important part. And those are probably the key components to what the vertical diet tries to do, to provide people a kind of a pathway to success. And then it takes a lot of interaction. For the frontline people, the personal trainers that are there with the clients on a regular basis, repetitively, weekly, or even just communicating with them and encouraging them, we see that those people are most likely to comply.
So you've mentioned that you train all kinds of athletes, different age groups, genders, everything. Do you think the vertical diet is for everyone? And if someone wanted to start, what are some really quick go-to steps 1, 2, 3 that they can do to start the vertical diet?
Yeah, I do believe it's for everyone. Obviously, I mentioned that we might increase calories, and of course we would have a different training protocol for those people who are competing. But for the dad bod and the soccer mom, that's most of my clientele over the last many years. And those folks, the foundation is the same in terms of calories are king, getting sufficient protein, micronutrient densities, high satiety foods, and then a program that they can adhere to, something that's simple, sensible, and sustainable. What was the second half of that question you mentioned?
What's a quick 1, 2, 3 steps
Perfect.
for people to start?
Yep. I have a quick start guide
cool.
in my vertical diet ebook, where in 5 minutes, on a 3x5 card, in less than 60 seconds, I could map out a program for somebody. We went over those things now. First and foremost, you just jump on and you calculate your BMR. And I have a Mifflin-St. Jeor equation that you can Google on the internet if you want, and you type in your height and weight and workload, and it spits out a number at you. That's an estimate.
And that's your maintenance calories.
That would be your maintenance calories. And then if you wanted to lose weight, you would deduct 300 to 500 calories from that. If you wanted to gain weight, just the opposite. You would add calories to that. And then you would use those calories to determine what you would eat that day. And then what I do is I ask, how many times a day do you like to eat? Do you like to have 2 meals a day, 3 meals a day, 4 meals a day? And whatever's consistent with their typical lifestyle, and then you just divide that total calories by the number of meals to give you your per meal total. And then I want to plug in protein, first and foremost. I like to get at least 30, 40 grams of protein per meal. If I've got a 170-pound woman who wants to drop down to 150, I'll use the 150 as her goal weight. And I'll say a gram of protein per pound of body weight. So that's going to give her right around 37 to 40 grams of protein per meal. And the reason I'm specifically honing in on a woman here is because they tend to undereat protein.
I see.
And so if they're eating 3 meals at about 40 grams of protein per meal, their typical breakfast might be 1 egg and a bagel and a cup of coffee. Well, that's 8 grams of protein.
Yeah.
Where's the other 30 coming from? And that's the first bridge that we need to cross is getting them to eat more protein at each meal. Highly satiating, protective of lean body mass, high thermic effect of food. You can eat 100 calories of protein and only net out 70, as you're aware. So that helps control glycemia, subsequent meal hunger. All those things are keyed on with protein. So it's the first thing I do. Calculate their calories. I've got an appendix in the Vertical Diet ebook. It's over 225 pages with over 500 references to peer-reviewed literature and articles and videos.
So you didn't make all of it up. It's actually backed by science.
Yeah, well, and I partnered with a PhD RDN about 3 years ago, Dr. Damon McCune, who is Director of Dietetics at UNLV. And we sat down and we spent hundreds of hours together, and we actually wrote the entire book that we then submitted and is currently in Amazon.
Can I put my name on the book too?
You can put it on there. Yeah, you could say you helped. We'll put you on the next edition. Yeah. It's Vertical Diet 3.0 is my ebook currently because it started as a 1.0 and then I expanded on it and added new information and updated it to a 2 and now a 3 and we've got a 4 pending.
Oh, cool.
And I give all the updated information for free to anybody who's bought a previous version. But in that book I have an appendix that has diets from 1,250 calories up to 5,000 calories in 250 calorie intervals. So once you've calculated on my quick start guide,
you can just follow it.
Once you've calculated your calories, then you just jump to that number of calories in the diet plan. And you start with that. And then I have grocery shopping lists that you can print out and take to the store. It tells you exactly what to buy.
Oh, you make it easy.
And then I've got videos that show you kind of how to prep the meals, because as I mentioned, meal prep is a huge component of compliance. Whether you prep or we prep, I started a meal prep company and I ship meals nationwide where you just go on to my website and if you need a 500 calorie meal or a 400 calorie meal, there it is. And it's a 2-to-1 protein to fat ratio and it's got the macros that I prefer to recommend to people. And so we can do it that way or you can make your own food. But either way, whether you prep or we prep for you, meal prepping's the number one success tool that you can use to comply with the diet. And so I set that up to make that easy to start in that simple quick start guide that's in the beginning of the book.
So if people want to start, where can they find your book, your quick start guide?
StanEfforting.com. They can head on in there. Yeah.
Awesome. You heard it here. Get jacked like me. I used to order his Monster Mash all the time. So delicious. Is it back now?
It is back, and I brought a whole bunch with me. We're going to feed it today.
Hell yeah. See you guys next time.